Engage, enlighten, empower.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Create More Business Live. I am your host, Roderick Ferrier. Today we are honored. We have a special guest. Dr. Jack Singer is joining us today. Dr. Jack holds a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology and a postdoctorate in clinical and sports psychology. He is a licensed psychologist, a professional speaker, a success acceleration mentor for elite athletes and financial professionals, and for the past 33 years, he has keynoted conferences and consulted with major financial organizations, including MetLife, Northwestern Mutual, Citibank, Union Bank, Transamerica, Mutual of Omaha, AON, Centaurus Financial, and The Principal. And Dr. Jack, that's a mouthful. Jack has taught on the faculties of 6 universities, including an assistant professorship at the United States Air Force Academy, and he has authored 4 books and more than 170 articles. His most recent book is titled The Financial Advisor's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide. Dr. Jack's articles appear in such diverse publications as Financial Advisor Magazine, On Wall Street, The Manager's Intelligent Report, Personal Excellence Essentials, InsuranceForums.com, and Championship Performance. He appears frequently on Fox Sports, ESPN, CNN, MSNBC, and radio talk shows throughout the United States and Canada. Dr. Jack's passion is teaching financial professionals how to develop the exact same mindset that he has taught to Olympic gold medal winners and professional athletes for more than 30 years. His goal is to show you how to quickly raise your game to the next level by expertly navigating the stress-filled minefields that go with the territory and achieve world-class success consistently. Today, you will learn the number one fear that all professionals face and how to overcome it. How to give yourself an emotional facelift, the most powerful skill for continued success, and a 5-minute mental toughness skill to propel you through the minefields to success. Dr. Jack, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We're honored to have you, and I'm going to turn the reins over to you and let you share this valuable information with my listeners today.
Thank you so much, Rod, and it's really a pleasure and a treat to be able to address your listeners. You're running a wonderful service for them, a selfless service, if you will, to provide information that will help people not only change their careers but to change their lives. And certainly I can identify with that and want to be just part of that to provide this knowledge for them. So today we're going to talk about 3 amazingly simple steps for quickly developing the mindset of a champion financial professional. It's important that you understand that champion is emphasized here because I have spent my entire professional career developing champions, and the exact same skills that I teach to financial advisors are the ones that I have been teaching to athletes. There's a big parallel, and many of your listeners perhaps have been athletes in the past, but it doesn't matter if you're an athlete or not. These are psychologically research-based, cutting-edge skills that I'm going to teach you that apply to anybody in any profession. Okay, so we can move to the next slide now. So let's talk about developing shortcuts for programming your mindset. And before we do that, I want to tell you about the number one fear that all financial professionals face, as well as other professionals. You don't have to be a financial professional to face this. So this fear that I'm referring to is really what we call the imposter fear. Now, what do I mean by that? I'll just give you a very brief definition. A brief definition is when your mentors or your managers or your colleagues or people in your family have a higher impression of what they think you're capable of than you have yourself. In your heart of hearts, you're worried that I'm going to disappoint people because I'm not as good as they think I am, and it's only a matter of time before they figure this out, and it's going to be embarrassing and difficult for me. That's what we call the imposter fear. Most professionals have gone through it at some point in their life, but how do you pull out of it, or does it linger forever? And so when I talk about programming your mindset, it begins with conquering your internal critic. I've labeled this the internal critic. I wrote a book once that had that in the title, and I call that little voice inside your head that speaks negative to you. And that little voice speaking negative to you is the way that this imposter fear, as well as any other fear, develops. And we can eradicate that. So first, there's a formula there that I put down that I want you to understand, and that's your sales performance or your performance as a financial planner or advisor or whatever your performance is, always equals your talent plus your knowledge plus the skill set you've developed minus your distractions. So what do I mean by that? We can move down to the next one now. Minus your distractions. Distractions are self-talk that are negative. Negative self-talk, I call it toxic self-talk, and another phrase that I've used for it is linguistic toxicity. These are distractions that you cause yourself by constantly hammering yourself with negative self-talk that's really toxic to you. So next, I'll show you what I mean by that. What-if thoughts, they always lead to anxiety and fear. Like, what if I don't make the sale? Or what if this person doesn't like me? Or what if this client of mine is angry because her portfolio took a hit when the market went down? Those are the what-if statements. Those are nasty, and they're very difficult habits because we develop them over years of repetition. Next, thoughts about needing to achieve a specific goal or to be perfect. It's if you keep telling yourself, if I didn't do this, then I failed, instead of saying, the world is gray. It's not black or white. You don't have to be perfect to be successful and to be doing what you want to do. And if you set your goals unrealistically high, that doesn't mean you failed because you didn't accomplish them. It means that it's time to revisit those goals and think about something more realistic. Next, comparing yourself to successful colleagues and considering yourself a failure as a result. So many of us do that. Someone else in the same office has been much more successful at prospecting, therefore I must be a failure. None of these things happen to be true, but that's what you tell yourself because of these unfortunate linguistic, toxic belief ideas that you've developed over the years. So these are habits that once you recognize them can be broken down. Next, there are several ways that our thinking becomes distorted because of this linguistic toxicity. And I've listed 3 here, but there's any number of these ways that we distort our thinking. And once we understand how our thinking is distorted, we can change it. So catastrophizing happens when you start things with what if, like, what if I can't adapt to all the new changes in the industry? This will be a disaster. Well, there are a lot of new changes coming down the pike in the insurance industry, as we know. There are a lot of fiduciary changes that take place. Advisors are dealing with compliance and fiduciary issues all the time. But if you don't adapt to them, you don't learn them, you don't master them right away, is that really a disaster? Or can you give yourself a break and give yourself more time? Next, mind reading. Deciding that your clients are irritated at their premium increases and therefore they must be angry at you, or deciding that your clients are upset because the market has been volatile and you didn't warn them that this could happen. Okay, we often try to decide what people are thinking about us without really checking it out. And when we do that, we get ourselves anxious and upset and irritated ourselves when we really don't have any evidence that what we were worried about ever happened. Next, overgeneralization. Geico, for example, and other insurance companies spend so much money on advertising that I'll never be able to compete. Well, all of that is true. A lot of companies compete with you with their advertising, but you have a creative mind, and there are many things that you can offer that companies that are national like Geico can't. What about the customer service? What about the hands-on care that you provide to people? What about other insurance products that you can move into if you're an insurance provider? What about getting into financial planning and advising? So there are so many other things you can do. So the point here is that we need to get a hold of these negative linguistic toxic habits we have so that we can change them. Next, when you've done this for so many years, and we start this when we're very young, we develop these habits. When you've done it for so many years, you've actually hypnotized yourself to continue to use these habits. You know, your subconscious mind, doesn't know the difference between what's really happening and what you're just thinking, so it goes along with what you're thinking. And so you've sort of hypnotized yourself into toxic thinking habits. And you need to build in what I call linguistic nutrition, healthy self-talk. For example, I do not have to be perfect to be successful. Next. Regardless of the changes in my industry and the paperwork challenges, I provide fabulous service to my clients, and I will continue to do so. Next. I can't control the competition, advances in internet insurance sales and so forth, but I can certainly control how I interpret those events in my mind. Let me speak to that for a moment. What I'm really talking about here is you have choices. The choice is how you're going to interpret a set of events that take place in your life. So if the market gets volatile or there are all kinds of things happening globally that cause the market to crash over a series of days, you can't control that. But what you can control is how you interpret those events in your mind, because it's your interpretation that will determine whether you're going to have a nutritious self-talk habit or a toxic self-talk habit. And so many of us have just gotten used to having negative, counterproductive self-talk when bad things happen, but you have a choice. You can change it. So let's go to the next one. We'll talk about one of the most powerful, well, we'll skip through that because number 4 is just coming up with your own idea of another linguistic habit that you have. But let's go to the next one. How to give yourself an emotional facelift. So this is going to be one of the main ways that you can change these negative habits that I've talked about, that you can actually change it with one of the most powerful and most powerfully researched psychological techniques that we know. This all comes under the field of positive psychology, which is a brand new field of study that was started about 10 years ago, where we look at how we can help people to become the person that they're capable of being, how we can unleash the power that lies within, how we can break through the barriers of self-doubt. All of these things take place with this one major, powerful, consistent psychological technique. And that is to maintain an optimistic explanatory style regardless of the situation you're in. Next. So an optimistic explanatory style, what do we mean by that? It's not as simple as the glass is half full, half empty. What we're really talking about is how do you explain lousy outcomes and events to yourself? Do you do it in an optimistic way, or do you do it in a pessimistic way? How do you persevere and remain resilient under adversity? Do you actually persevere and remain resilient under adversity, or do you collapse under adversity? Are setbacks viewed as overwhelming disasters or as manageable hurdles that can be overcome? These are the essential questions to ask yourself to determine whether you're looking at things in an optimistic way with optimistic expectations or in a pessimistic way with pessimistic expectations. Next. I'd love to tell you that the research that's behind this is by a psychologist named Martin Seligman at Stanford. He wrote many books on this, and he's become like the guru of positive psychology. One of his most famous books is Learned Optimism. It teaches you how to develop this if you're naturally not hardwired to be optimistic. Many of us, because of our DNA and because of our upbringing with mom and dad, learn to be pessimistic. We just follow what we've been seeing, but you can change all of this. So learned optimism is how you can change all of it. So let's talk about what pessimists do as opposed to what optimists do. There's 3 dynamics that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about how people look at the cause of a lousy outcome or an unfortunate outcome, how they look at the permanence of the outcome, and whether it's pervasive. So how do pessimistically hardwired people explain lousy outcomes? So for example, you tried to make a sale today to a new client. The client really shut you down, said they aren't interested, and you leave their office or you get off the phone. You consider that a lousy outcome. Pessimistically oriented people will look at this in terms of the internal cause. It was all my fault. Next. in terms that I should have done something differently. I wasn't prepared. Next, in terms of permanence, this is probably going to continue to happen to me. It'll keep happening, and I just feel helpless. There's nothing I can do about this. Next, it's pervasive. This is just one example of my screw-ups, and I have many. So you've succeeded then in putting yourself down because of not making this sale. Now, how do optimists look at lousy outcomes? Let's look at how an optimistic person would do that next. The external cause is how they would see this. This was a fluke. This is based on what this person's day has been. They weren't interested in this. This is an exception to the rule. I need to move on to the next opportunity. That's the difference between optimistically looking at lousy outcomes and pessimistically looking at them. Next. In terms of pervasive and so forth, temporary or permanent, this is temporary. It's a temporary setback. I'll bounce back from this. The next opportunity is just around the corner. Next. It's exclusive. It's not pervasive. Okay, I had difficulty with this sale, but there are so many areas in my life where I thrive that this is not reflective of who I am or my skill or my ability, so I can move on. Next slide, please. So how do pessimistic people explain good outcomes? You might think a pessimistically oriented person is very happy and very relieved when they have good outcomes. The answer to that is no, they aren't. They aren't relieved when they have good outcomes. Next. They look at that as an external cause. I was lucky. It had little to do with me. The person was in a mood to buy. I didn't have anything to do with this. Next. It's temporary. This was a fluke. It probably won't happen consistently. Next. Exclusive. Well, this is a good outcome, but it's unlikely to affect other areas of my life where I have major problems, you see. So pessimistically oriented people explain good outcomes in negative, toxic ways. Next slide. How do optimistic people explain good outcomes? Next. First of all, it was an internal cause. Good things happened to me because of my skills, my work ethic, my motivation. Next. Good things are going to continue to happen to me. This is a permanent skill set that I have. Next. It's pervasive. This is just one of the example of the many areas in my life where I have the skills and talent to be successful. So you see the difference, the key difference between people who are optimistically oriented and pessimistically oriented is the optimists look at good outcomes as being caused by themselves, that they're going to be permanent outcomes, and that they're going to continue to happen to them, whereas the pessimists look at good outcomes as this is a fluke, I wasn't responsible for it, this is temporary, it's only a matter of time before bad things keep happening, and bad things keep happening in my life. And then when negative things happen, the optimists look at that as that wasn't because of my skills, this was a fluke, and this is only a temporary setback, and I may have had difficulty with this, but there are so many areas of my life in which I thrive, whereas the optimists look at the negative or negative outcomes as these are the flukes and they don't have anything to do with what I'm going to do, and good outcomes will continue to happen to me and be permanent. So let's move to the next slide now, because what I wanted to make sure all of you have is one of the most powerful strategies that I've ever taught to people. I have found that athletes, for example, who I've worked with over the years have said that this works better than a lot of the things that they've been coached to do, that it only takes 5 or 10 minutes, and yet if they do this before a game or before a match, that it has a powerful, powerful impact on the outcome. So I wanted to share this with you, and I've adapted it for financial professionals. How to quickly ignite mental toughness and build resiliency. What we're trying to do here is build your resiliency to stress and to being overcome by the linguistic toxicity that I talked about. And so this is a strategy that you can use very quickly whenever you're stressed, you're worried, you're pressured, you're anxious, or you recognize that negative, toxic thoughts enter your mind. And this can only take 5 minutes and yet have a powerful impact. So it doesn't take a lot of time away from you, but really can lead to tremendous results. Next. The first thing you have to do, the step one, is to recognize your stress-producing negative trigger thoughts. For example, I'm worried that I'll never be able to deal with all of the changes in my industry and I may have to look for another career. Okay, that's a great example of a negative, toxic thought. It comes under the category of catastrophizing that we talked about before, where you're looking at a little piece of information that we have changes in the industry and you've taken it to its worst possible consequence, which is, I'm going to have to give up my career and find something else to do at my age. Next. So once you recognize that the negative thought has entered your mind, we want to stop that thought dead in its tracks. And I suggest that you get yourself a number 64 rubber band. What is a number 64 rubber band? It's the same rubber band that the mail comes in. It's a kind of a fat rubber band that would sit loosely on your wrist. And I suggest you wear it around the office until you really have developed this mental toughness habit and you don't need the rubber band anymore. But the first thing you do is once you recognize that these negative thoughts have gone through your mind, you snap the rubber band. Snap it hard enough to get your attention. Now, because these thoughts are habits and they've been inculcated in you over many years, the thoughts may want to keep wanting to creep back in, but you have to keep snapping until your subconscious mind says, I don't like this. I better stop this thought. I don't like this pain. Next. So once you snap the rubber band, we want to reward the fact that you've stopped this negative self-defeating thoughts. And we reward it by taking a few deep centering breaths. And this is the most relaxing, calming kind of breath there is. 4 seconds in through your nose, hold it for 4 seconds, and then 7 seconds out through your mouth. So I'm going to say it to you, and you practice it while I'm saying it. Breathe in now through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 2, 3, 4. Out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's the most relaxing, calming breathing, and that will immediately calm you down from the emotional uproar that the original thought was starting to take within your body. Next. Now, I talk about a performance statement that everyone should have, that it should be written down somewhere on a 3x5 card and written on your computer desktop. It's a performance statement about what it takes to give you maximum success in performing your best against your competition. What would it take? For example, a financial professional told me that his performance statement is, every day on my way to the office, I remind myself to get smarter and wiser this day, to grow my knowledge, and to be able to be the best advisor my clients could ever engage. That's a wonderful example. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as that. It can be very simple. I will contact some of my most difficult clients today because they need to hear from me. Or I will make sure that this day I learn something that I didn't know the day before that I can provide for my clients. Next. So we want to repeat that performance statement even if you read it to yourself. The next step is to recall your greatest success. And I call it a personal highlight reel. Think about whatever you're working on. Are you working on prospecting and developing new referrals or clients? Or are you working on gaining more knowledge of products so that you can provide better services for your clients? Whatever you're working on, I want you to reflect back in your career to the greatest day of success you ever had, where things were just going right for you, where you were in a zone, where everything was just happening exactly the way you dreamed it could be. And I want you to think about that day in as much detail as you can. You know, what were you wearing that day? Where did this happen? What was the environment like? What was the weather like that day? Were you smiling when you entered the room? Were the clients or potential clients smiling back? Were you feeling powerful when you got on the phone? Whatever the specific details are that you were feeling that day, try to reestablish them in your mind and visualize them with your eyes closed as a highlight reel so that you can go back to this anytime and feel wonderful about the possibilities. Next. So now we're coming down to the home stretch. You've already done 5 of these 7 steps. The next step is to repeat your identity statement. So what is an identity statement? What is a strength that you currently have or one that you'd like to develop next? The identity statement should also be what you ultimately want to accomplish. And you can frame both parts of these as though the objectives have already been achieved. For example, a college athlete may have an identity statement that he becomes the best quarterback on his team, and in fact he's going to be all conference this year. That's an identity statement. Next. The example that a financial professional told me of his identity statement is, I am the most conscientious producer in my firm. Now, he may not actually be so, but that's his goal. I always have my clients' specific needs and goals at the top of my priorities, and I dig deep with each client, making sure that I use my active, empathic listening skills, I'll explain that in a minute, to understand them, and I make sure that I provide them with the best financial and insurance services available anywhere in the world. So that's an example of where you want to be, where you think you are, where you hope to be, but you're saying this as if you've already experienced this, and we're conditioning your subconscious mind to believe this. That's the most important thing. Your subconscious mind has already begun to believe all the negatives you've told it. Let's change it now to believe all of these positives, just like with an athlete. If they don't think they can win, their subconscious mind will make sure they don't. If they think they can win, they're on the road to success. So that's very, very critical. So that's the identity statement of your true identity and where you want it to be. Now, I mentioned something in there that I said I'd get back to. Active empathic listening. We don't have time in this particular podcast to discuss that, but you can look that up. You can Google it, active empathic listening. It's a form of communicating with clients, with relationships, with your children, with your spouse, with anybody that really zones you in on the feelings and emotions of the other person so that once you're listening, you can get much more accomplished. And certainly with clients, many of the errors that a lot of financial professionals make is they're so busy trying to impress the client with what the services they provide, how much experience they've had, what they can give to them, that they're not listening to what the client's pain is and what the client needs and what the client's questions are. And with active empathic listening, you can get to the bottom of this. Next slide. So we're now at the final stage, the final step. What can you do at the end of this to anchor it? And the answer is you anchor it with another centering breath. You take it in through your nose to the count of 4, hold it for 4 seconds, and then a big exhale to the count of 7. That's the key. So you've started this off by breathing slowly and deeply, and you finished it off by breathing slowly and deeply. And I'm guaranteeing you that if you practice mental toughness each day in every circumstance that it comes up, and it only takes a few minutes, this will be a game changer because you will develop the habit of being mentally tough whenever you're challenged instead of your old habit, which is to fall prey to anxiety, to irritation, to anger, to feeling helpless, to feeling irritable. Those are the things that happen when you don't stop the negative thoughts, when you consistently use negative toxicity instead of, linguistic toxicity instead of linguistic nutrition. So what have you learned today? I realize you learned it fast and quick, but all of these things take time. They can be absorbed. There are shortcuts to programming your mindset. It begins with conquering your internal critic. You know that the negative distractions in terms of your thinking will affect your performance no matter what your talent base is and how much skill you have. So you can change all of that. You've learned how to give yourself an emotional facelift by embracing the most powerful determinant of consistent success, and that's developing and maintaining an optimistic, explanatory style no matter what happens, and you can learn to do that. And finally, you've learned how to quickly ignite mental toughness and use it every day so that it will work for you from now and in your total future, whether it's business, career-wise, or whether it's in your personal life. I'm really very happy and very honored that you listened to this podcast today, and I'm sure that your career is going to make a change. Now, the big thing here is most people get information, they go to seminars, they go to podcasts, and then they go back to their old habits. So the best thing you can do now is make yourself responsible to start making some of these changes. Start writing down things you're going to change today. That's very important. Otherwise, you'll fall back on your old habits. And once you write these things down, you're going to, gosh, this was one of the best things I ever did. Thanks again to Rod for inviting me. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to doing another one down the road.
Dr. Jack, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. That was very insightful. Guys, I spent a number of years in the financial services industry in a variety of roles, from P&C agent to life insurance to financial investing. And the information that Dr. Jack shared with you, I suffered from a lot of the same things that he spoke of today. And I wish that I would have had this advice about 15, 17 years ago in my life. I've invested thousands of dollars in courses and seminars to overcome those same challenges that he talked about today. So take his advice to heart, practice the steps that he gave you. It will change your game. It will help you in your business. Thank you, Jack, so much for sharing that with us today.
It's my pleasure, Ron.
You can learn more about Dr. Jack Sanger by going to createmorebusinessnow.com and click on Find a Coach. You will find his information there in the drop-down box. And as always, Create More Business Now Live is every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 noon.
Engage, enlight, empower.